Welcome to another episode of Up in the Blue Seats. I'm EmmaKate Austin. I'm actually the producer of this show. I've got Hall of Famer Larry Brooks joining me. Molly and Brian are taking some vacation time. So I wanted to bring Larry in, though, because it was a really busy day for the Rangers yesterday on that first day of free agency. Larry, it's kind of crazy to look at this Rangers roster now. Some of these names that have been around for so long, Kreider, Trouba, and now K'Andre Miller, are no longer with the team. But I think if you're a Rangers fan, you have to be pretty happy with what Drury accomplished yesterday. So, Larry, if you're a Rangers fan, how do you think people are feeling after all the flurry of moves yesterday?
I think I think there's probably a little bit of relief because the day could have gone very wrong. The Rangers were in tight spaces. They didn't have a lot of cap space. They knew they were trying to, they'd been trying to move K'Andre Miller for weeks. Um, they knew they were in a vulnerable position if Will Cuylle got an offer sheet, so they needed to reserve enough space in order to match that. And so yesterday could have been a difficult day for the Rangers, but it became a very good one. Um, with their cap constraints, with their limitations in what they could do, they did well. They got they signed their priority target and free agent and the guy and in Vladislav Gavrikov from Los Angeles, who was the number one free agent defenseman on the market when July 1st came around. So, and they got him for less. He had this attraction to New York. He wanted to come to New York. So 7 years at 7 million. I'm not thrilled with 7 years for a 29-year-old player. No one really is, but that's the cost of doing business. And the Rangers were able to get Gavrikov for a very reasonable number. And in a couple of years, when the cap keeps going up, the number is going to be dwarfed by dozens of defensemen in the league. So they got their first pair of defensemen to partner with Adam Fox, and that was the giant hole in their roster. Well, they have others, but that was the most substantial, most significant hole, and they filled it. They have a player who now can team with Adam and present a strong first pair. Gavrikov's, is a defense first guy. He's kind of a stay at home. He's kind of an old school guy. He breaks up entries. He's strong in front. Um, he's intelligent. He reads well. His gap control is good. Everything you like about a defensive defenseman are the qualities that Gavrikov will bring within a structure, I think that's going to be a lot stronger than it was last year and even the year before. I think that Mike Sullivan and David Quinn, who presumably is going to handle the defense as one of the assistants, um, that will be job one from day one to instruct and employ and teach structure, defensive structure. And that's not only on the defense, that's obviously, of course, the forwards. So I think that the addition of Gavrikov solidifies their defense. Certainly the top four. I expect Braden Schneider to move to the left now to play with Will Borgen on the second pair. And then the third pair, is in flux, but their top four should be respectable, credible, and good. Actually, they should have a very strong first pair this year. Then you move on to K'Andre Miller. The Rangers just didn't want to commit to him long term. There's, his trajectory has not been smooth. He's regressed each of the last 2 years. Now, everyone regressed last year. So it's hard to pin it on an individual. Everyone regressed last year, but he had regressed 2 consecutive years. I don't think he got particularly good coaching from Phil Housley, but at some point it's a player's responsibility to take steps forwards too. Um, I don't think the Rangers would have necessarily looked to move K'Andre if he weren't in a contract year, if they didn't need to, if he weren't a restricted free agent. They were not going to commit to him long term. I'm shocked that Carolina gave him the 8 years, 7.5. I just am. Like it, like that's a
That's,
lot.
that was a pretty good deal for
You
him, I
know,
gotta say. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a great deal. I think he said this morning, he and his mom are now set up for life, and of course they are. It's generational now, and great for him. Um, but we knew that Drury wanted to change the chemistry in the room. Miller was their best asset that they could afford to lose. And I think they did well in the return. They got a first and second in next year's draft. It's top 10 protected next year, but if you get the 15th, 16th, 17th pick in the draft in a very deep draft, they've done well. They got a second rounder also, and they got a prospect to play right defense, a 22-year-old from Darien. So, so I think that scenario turned out positively, and the other scenario that turned out positively was their ability to sign Will Cuylle to a 2-year deal at 3.9 million instead of having to contend with an offer sheet that would have probably been 6 or 7 years at a price that the Rangers would have had a difficult time to accommodate. So there were small steps yesterday, but there were important steps. And the roster was not transformed. They're not suddenly back to where they were, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or even last summer, where people perceived them as a Stanley Cup contender. I know I think they were the favorite to come out of the East last year. And honestly, if you had watched them play against Florida in the finals, no one should have thought that. I actually, like last year is over, and I think that's going to be the theme going forward. Like last year is over. It was an aberration. We know what it was, as to quote John Tortorella. We know what they did. Um, but the roster now is credible, and I think they are certainly a playoff contender. They were a playoff contender last year, right? And they couldn't have been worse.
Yeah.
But I think the structure, look, there are holes. There are definite holes in the lineup. This is going to have to be a very disciplined team. Shesterkin's going to have to, rebound and have a year like he did when he won the Vezina, but that was 3 years ago now. So, we'll see. But July 1st could have been a disaster, and it turned out to be pretty good. So I think, when Ranger fans are looking at that, I think that's the way I think that's the perspective. You know, Worst case scenario was avoided. It was a pretty good scenario.
Exactly. It does kind of, looking at this defense, it kind of just feels like, a fresh start. They're bringing in this established defenseman who had a great season last year in LA, 30 points, pretty good defensive numbers. And then, I think we all kind of knew it was time for K'Andre to find a fresh start, and hopefully he does find that
Yeah.
success in Carolina with Brind'Amour. And then, now they have Cooley locked down for a little bit. So it's like, I feel like you got to be feeling good, kind of breathing a sigh of relief if you're the Rangers. I mean, is there anything else they can or need to do before the season gets underway, or are we looking at it kind of
There are
this
a lot of things
is
that I think there are a lot of things they need to do. There aren't very many that they're going to be able to do. They have no cap space. So anything they would have to do would be a zero sum exchange. Unless something unexpected develops, I think this is pretty much the roster they'll go into training camp with. Maybe they'll add a veteran on a professional tryout or two for training camp. Because the other thing we have to keep in mind is we don't really know what Mike Sullivan thinks about anything. We don't. So there may be guys out there who won't have contracts in August that Sullivan would like to invite for a training camp tryout. So, but I think that's on the margins. I think everything they do from now on will be on the margins. And we'll see, we'll see how the season unfolds and if they can patch weaknesses. You know, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the younger wingers. They're going to have to step up, and it's also important for the Rangers not to rush their wingers either. Like if Gabe Perreault is not ready to play in the top six, then he should be in Hartford. He shouldn't be bouncing around and the third line, the fourth line, scratched here and there. He's a top six player. He needs to be in the top six. And if he can't make it in the top six, then chances are my opinion is that players like that need to play in their roles. So we don't know how Gabe Perreault is going to go through training camp. We don't know if this is the year that Brennan Othman takes the step, but the opportunity is there for them. It's not clogged by any means. Everyone's going to have a chance. And again, when we talk about, well, okay, the fourth line will be Rempe, Edstrom, and Carrick. That was the fourth line under Laviolette. We have no idea what Sullivan thinks. Could Matt Rempe get more responsibility? Is Matt Rempe not going to be a regular for Mike Sullivan? We just don't know. But again, I think they're going into this season on a firmer footing than might have been anticipated 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And one other name who we didn't really talk about in the flurry of yesterday, but you wrote this the other day about Zac Jones. So why would you say that letting him go was the right decision for the Rangers?
Well, it was humane. It was just, Zac Jones is a young player who needs to play. There have been 3 coaching staffs now who have seen Zac Jones kind of as the seventh defenseman. And, that's not a bad job, but if you're 22, 23 years old and you've been a seventh defenseman, you want the opportunity to play. And Jones, really wasn't going to get that opportunity here. I think if Mike Sullivan had come in and said, look, I think Zac Jones is going to be in our top six, no questions asked. I want him. I think it would have gone in a different direction. But I think the conversations between Drury and Jones's agent probably led to this decision. And now Zac, he signed a deal in Buffalo, correct? And he'll get a shot. He'll get his shot. He's a puck mover, and the issue with Jones is they were undersized. Yeah, they had too many undersized defensemen to have another one. That was always the view from the coaching staff. And the other part about Jones, and you can go back to even to Nils Lundqvist when he was here, is that Jones should be running a power play. But with Adam Fox on the first pair, he wasn't going to get that opportunity. And then when they came with their second unit, they generally had a more defense-oriented player. They either had Trouba back there for a couple of years, and they had Keandre. So there wasn't the opportunity for Jones to display his greatest asset. Hopefully he gets that opportunity and he'll see. We'll see, he'll see whether he was slotted properly or whether the Rangers missed him.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. It does feel like all eyes are now shifting to Mike Sullivan to see what he can do with this roster. And I am going to remember that you said this is a playoff or a team that has the ability to make the playoff. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But yeah, it's going to be a big job, but I think, hopefully Mike Sullivan is the guy to, make the most of what he's got here in New York.
Yeah. Well, he'll be a no-nonsense guy. He believes in structure. And again, if David Quinn, again, they haven't announced And so maybe David won't handle the D, but he was a defenseman, right? And Joe Sacco, the other assistant, was a forward. So, I don't know. Um, but the Rangers structure when Quinn was the head coach was pretty good. I mean, they weren't a great team, obviously. They did have one real good year under Quinn. Um, but I have more confidence in David Quinn as the defensive coordinator than I did in Phil Housley, who didn't coordinate much at all.
Yeah, not so much. All right. Well, Larry, thank you so much for taking the time to break down all this free agency excitement. Again, like I said earlier, it does seem like a fresh start for a lot of people in and now outside the Rangers organization. We got a little bit more time before training camp gets underway, but as always, stay tuned to New York Post Sports for all things Rangers and up in the blue seats. And Larry, thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh, yeah, thanks.